Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. As Michigan fans, we've been put through the ringer the last couple of days trying to determine whether some of these players are going to the NFL draft or coming back to Michigan in 2025. And early Friday morning, us Michigan fans get some massive news as Ryan Zucchi of M Live. And I want to give Ryan Zucchi some credit because it's been hard to find information about some of these guys coming back or going to the NFL draft. Ryan Zucchi talks to Lou Esposito this morning. Lou Esposito tells him, hey, Rayshaun Benny's going to be back in 2025. Massive news for Michigan for a couple of different reasons. One, Rayshaun Benny, really, really good football player. That probably doesn't get the credit he deserves because he's playing behind guys like Mason Graham and Kenneth Graham. We're talking generationally talented defensive linemen, but has been a very solid piece for Michigan over the last couple of years. He continues to get better as a football player, and you kind of look into 2025, Rayshaun Benny might be the best interior defensive lineman that'll be on Michigan's team. So, one, you get a really good football player. You get a leader in the locker room going into 2025. But just as importantly, you maintain a lot of quality depth here, too. And we talked about, hey, replacing Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant is going to be impossible to replace those players, period. But how can you kind of take that step as a defensive line overall, become a little bit deeper? You add Rayshaun Benny, who's not only a really good football player, but adds another body to that defensive line. That's huge for us Michigan fans going into the 2025 year. Now, I want to talk more about Rayshaun Benny. I want to talk about some of the other names that we expect to be back for Michigan in 2025. But I want to make something or at least point something out that I really do appreciate from a Michigan fan standpoint. Look, we all know NIL is playing a massive role in the landscape of college football. There's a lot of different ways you can use NIL, right? Obviously, building your high school recruiting classes, going out and getting players from the transfer portal. One of the most under talked about real benefits for some teams in terms of NIL is keeping guys out of the NFL draft. And that is sounds to me like what Michigan's priority has been over the last couple of weeks. Yeah, we made some really quality additions in the transfer portal, but it seems like one of the biggest points of emphasis for Sherrone Moore the last couple of weeks is, hey, we got some really good football players that certainly could go to the NFL draft and be playing on Sundays in 2025. Can we use NIL to keep them at Michigan for one more year? And from what it sounds like, Michigan put on a clinic. And this is something that it's not the flashiest thing to talk about because it's more fun to talk about players coming into the program. There's a lot of teams that kind of ignore what they have on the roster and get so distracted by the new shiny players in the transfer portal. You forget you got some really good players on your football team that if you can take care of, it's just as good as going out to the transfer. In fact, in Michigan's case, it's better than going out to the transfer portal. Taking care of your guys, having that continuity, along with them all being really good football players, it's really cool to see Michigan prioritize what they have on the roster, while a lot of other teams don't seem to be doing it. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Rayshaun Benny. I want to talk about a few other names that we are monitoring or are coming back from Michigan in 2025. I think the last big name we're all looking at is Rod Moore. Before we get into it, as always, the Michigan fans, let it fly in the comment section. Would love to hear how we're feeling. Appreciate you guys rocking with it again. As a Michigan fan, it's been really fun talking this program. The amount of support y'all continue to show means the world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's start with Rayshaun Benny. Played over 300 snaps for Michigan in 2024. I mean, that's behind guys like Mason Graham and Kenneth Graham, was clearly our third best interior defensive lineman and very well might be our best interior defensive lineman going into 2025. 14 run stops, 14 quarterback hurries. He can give you that dirty work against the run, but he also can give you some juice in the pass rush. But the biggest thing for me is now you're looking at numbers and saying we got, 5, 6 bodies on the inside of the defensive line that we trust, right? Rayshaun Benny, number one. Trey Pierce, the way he played against Alabama in his second year, that Trey Pierce is 2. Demond Payne and Trey Williams coming into the transfer portal. A guy like Enoetta going into year 3. All of a sudden, you look at Michigan on the inside of the defensive line and say, hey, that's 5, 6 players that we got a lot of confidence in going into the 2025 season. You go back 12 months ago, or in August before we started football in 2024, how many defensive linemen on the inside did Michigan trust? It was probably Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and Rayshaun Benny. It was probably three. Now, Trey Pierce kind of emerged late in the 2024 season, but outside of, Trey Pierce, Michigan was thin on the defensive line. They're going to be deep going into the 2025 year. Now, another name that, again, none of these guys announced, but it sounds like Derek Moore is coming back too. And again, he said he was coming back, ironing out some things. You did not see his name pop up in terms of early NFL draft declarations that the NFL put out yesterday. You want to know who led the team in quarterback hurries in the 2024 year? It wasn't Josiah Stewart. It wasn't Mason Grant. It was Derek Moore. Derek Moore very well could be a day 2 NFL draft pick. He's coming back for one more year. Not only probably Michigan's best pass rusher. Well, TJ Guy might have something to say that. Not only one of Michigan's best pass rushers, but a really, really good run defender as well. Again, depth, impact guy. At the end of the day, I don't think you'd find a better edge rusher than Derek Moore in the transfer portal. And so instead of going out and saying, hey, let's go get some guys in the transfer portal, hey, no, let's go take care of Derek Moore, who's only getting better as a football player going into year 4, knows what we want to do on defense. This is how you should operate. There are a lot of teams that would have a guy like Derek Moore and say, all right, best of luck to you in the NFL draft. We're going to use our NIL resources to go get your replacement. Michigan kind of took the other approach and said, hey, we really like Derek Moore. Can we give you an NIL package that entices you to stay for one more year instead of go to the NFL draft? That's what Michigan's been doing, and it's been really effective. Another guy that's coming back, TJ Guy. And TJ Guy probably, we all expected him to come back, but Sneaky played some really good football, especially as a pure pass rusher for Michigan in the 2025 year. 17 quarterback hurries, a 21% pass rush win rate. Really good numbers from TJ Guy. Jon Barm coming back. That's what Lou Esposito said too. You didn't see his name in the list of early NFL declarations, NFL draft declarations either. I think the big storyline for Jon Barm is what are we going to do with him? Because it sounds like Michigan wants to get him incorporated a little bit more coming off the edge. And I think Michigan's linebacker room is deep and talented enough to kind of get creative with a guy like Jon Barm. What fires me up about Jon Barm is not only was he second on the team in tackles, only missed 6% of his tackles, was really good for Michigan in 2024. There's another level for me with Jon Barm. And I hate to make this comp, but it kind of comes to my mind a little bit like Abdul Carter. Started as an off-ball linebacker, started transitioning a little bit more as an edge rusher. Really interested to see what Michigan decides to do with Jon Barm from a personnel standpoint and from a position standpoint in the 2025 season. Ernest Homman coming back. Ernest Homman against Ohio State and Alabama. And this is what's so exciting for me is all of these guys were playing their best football late in the season. Ernest Hausman's 2 best games as a Michigan Wolverine to me were against Ohio State and against Alabama. And if he can pick up where he left off at the end of 2024 going into 2025, that is an all Big Ten caliber linebacker, along with Jon Barm, along with some guys like Troy Bowles coming in through the portal, along with a guy like Cole Sullivan. The last name that we're looking at, and I think is a monster name, and I think Michigan's doing everything they can to keep him for one more year, is Rod Moore. Now, Rod Moore, we all know what happened with Rod Moore, decided to come back for one more year for Michigan 2024, season-ending injury in spring camp. Why I think Rod Moore might be one of, if not the most important guy for Michigan to come back is for a couple of different reasons. One, this is going to be a young secondary for Michigan going into 2025. I look at Rod Moore, not only a really gifted athlete and football player, what he has going between the ears is special. I think he's one of the more, I guess you'd say, smart safeties that you see in the country. Every time you watch this kid play, it's right place, right time, being disruptive, turning the football over, making tackles in space. Why I think Rod Moore is so big here is you look at this Michigan depth chart here and say, hey, you like Brandon Hillman, you like Mason Curtis from what you saw from him as a true freshman. TJ Metcalf, to me, is a plug-and-play guy. You're young. Jair Hill's going into year 3. Josiah Edmond is going into year 2. Shamari Earls is going to be a true freshman. Mason Curtis is going to be a second-year guy. Brandon Hillman is going to be a third-year guy. TJ Metcalf's new to the program. That's a lot of new. It's a lot of young. What better player to make this all glue together than a guy like Rod Moore, who was extremely active for Michigan in 2024, even though he didn't play a single snap. You could tell he was grasping this defense kind of just to coach on the sideline at this point. If you get Rod Moore back, this secondary you feel great about. And we'll see what happens. But getting Rayshaun Benny back, not only a really good football player, but making this Michigan defensive line deeper, really important. And again, a huge shout out to Sherrone Moore. This is rare. You don't see a lot of programs do this. That is, hey, you can use NIL to recruit high school, which Michigan does. You can use NIL to recruit the portal, which Michigan does. You can also use NIL to keep your players on your roster. And that seemed to be the biggest goal for Michigan over the last couple of weeks. Because simply put, you ain't going to find many better defensive linemen than Rayshaun Benny in the portal. You're not going to find any better safeties than Rod Moore in the transfer portal. You're not going to find better linebackers than Ernest Homman and Jon Barm. Focusing on what's on your roster and taking care of those guys, it's not fun to talk about, but it means the absolute world. And Michigan seemingly has kind of locked down at least 5 starters coming back for Michigan. Really big news, especially Rayshaun Benny. We'll see what happens with Rod Moore. I think we're all waiting for some news to break on him. We'll talk about it when it happens. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.